now I would like to welcome to the stage Matt Mullenweg.
Thank you very much. Woo. Good afternoon, everybody. St. Louis, how about that city museum? Kind of wild. Do we still have the same number of people here as before? You know, that's always something we have to worry about. Thank you, Jen, for welcoming us all to WordCamp US. The St. Louis team has done an amazing job hosted. But before we actually get started with the state of the word, I have a surprise for you. So there's been a documentary made about WordPress, and I think it really captures the spirit of who we are and what we do. So before we get started, I'd like to present the world premiere of Open, the Community Code.
So Matt, there's a $10 billion ecosystem surrounding WordPress. How do you reconcile all of the volunteers giving so much of their time to the community without pay and the business of WordPress that makes so much money?
I think that the way... Let me restart that.
Then I open my browser to a choice of search engines that look up menus of almost anything I can think of, whether it's my projects on Egypt or Andrew playing games.
It sounds complicated, but really it all happens behind the scenes, so it's easy for you. And you're right, you can find anything from planning a vacation to MTV or real-time live audio. The net is fabulous.
Now maybe you've read or heard about the internet, but you're still not exactly sure what it is. Well, if that's the case, don't worry. In no time at all, you'll be able to impress everyone with your amazing techno savvy.
What about if I want to do my own homepage?
Now that's a big project. You'd better get someone to help you.
It's a piece of software that allows people to produce and publish websites on the internet and do so at a very affordable price. And its value is to be able to make publishing and internet publishing open to everyone.
With WordPress, it is open source. So from a legal point of view, from a copyright point of view, from a software freedom point of view, you can change every line of code, you can redistribute it, you can fork it, you can modify it, you can delete it, you can do really whatever you like. And regardless of what the developers or the creators want you to even, you know?
You know, a lot of people who haven't seen it probably don't understand it. They kind of feel that if you release your wares to the public, then you're giving it away. I mean, how are you going to monetize it? How are you going to make any money doing it?
Open source is a methodology for software development that literally depends on a critical mass of humans. And the more people we have contributing to WordPress, the open source software, the better the software gets for more people.
But I'm curious, what's this going to look like from a functional standpoint?
WordPress is made by hundreds of thousands of volunteers around the world, and most people think WordPress is made of code. And it's true, obviously it's a software, so it's made of code, but it's made of so much more.
You know, WordPress is a set of code, it is a website, it is a service, it is all these other things, but it's also an idea that brings people together. And something we can believe in, something that gives hope, and something that we can influence. And I think especially in today's day and age when there's so much going on in the world, something that we can believe in and can make leave the world a little bit better than how we found it, make a dent in the universe, try to create the web that we want our loved ones or our future progeny to grow up in, is exciting to be a part of.
This community is not made up of a group of paid individuals. They are all volunteers. And so a lot of people think, why do you do this? What is it about this community?
I think a lot about what motivates someone to participate in our program as a volunteer, whether it's day of staff, organizing team, speaker, etc. Some people come to us because they are so grateful to have this free software of WordPress and want to give back to the effort that makes WordPress possible. A lot of people come to us because they believe in the mission and they want to further it. A lot of people come to us because they realize that working within our program is a great way to grow their skills.
A WordCamp is a conference that is completely centered around WordPress. So if you go to another conference, you're going to go to a conference that has all different kinds of topics, right? But when you go to a WordCamp, it's 2 full days of everything related to WordPress.
See us at the booth. We're happy to chat about anything and have a good camp.
Everybody here is volunteering, is that right?
Everyone here is volunteering.
Okay.
Now I should say that our lead organizer, her volunteer has been a 40 plus, maybe even a 60 plus volunteer job for at least the past 3 weeks, probably even more. And so we are volunteering, but at the end, volunteering almost turns into that full-time job. And so because of that, the volunteers either work for themselves and have their own company, and so they take their valuable time and give it to this initiative, or they have very understanding and supportive employers who understand the value of community and who understand the value of this event. And by doing so, they then allow all of us to just give everything we have in these final stretch to this event. And so I want to thank these great companies for serving on this panel and doing what you do every day. Thank you.
I've gone to a lot of conferences, and those are called conferences, and those are called industry events. This is called a community. There's a difference based on that. You go to an industry event, you go to a trade show, it's about business. You go to a WordCamp conference, it's about the community, it's about making relationships.
WordPress is the community. It's the passion that people have for what they do. I think it's the idea that you can create as you will, and you can work with people at things like WordCamps and meetups and through the contributor teams. And I think it just makes people feel at home and welcome. And I think it's just something that everyone is looking for, a place to belong.
Every person in the community has this commonality of being open and wanting to help others without fear of hiding what they're working on or without fear of competition. As you'll see in this community, or maybe as you have seen, there are people that work for various web hosts that are all very good friends. There's no sense of you know, we're better than you, or we don't want you to succeed. Everybody kind of helps each other. I mean, we hear that in natural disasters. Oh, this community was so great, everybody stepped up and helped each other. And I think that's kind of human nature, except when you get into the world of business, or I want to sell this and make money, or I need to do this to put food on the table. In spite of all that, when you come to a WordCamp, it's so inspiring to see the openness and the willingness of everybody to help each other.
I just got there and I was like, this is unbelievable. All these people are here to make a piece of software that is used by other millions of people.
This is a community that really thrives on openness, collaboration, and including more people than they necessarily need.
So Matt, there's a $10 billion ecosystem surrounding WordPress. How do you reconcile all of the volunteers giving so much of their time to the community without pay, and the business of WordPress that makes so much money?
I think that the way, let me restart that. So WordPress is built on the GPL, which provides the 4 freedoms. One of the freedoms says that you can charge for things. So although we distribute all the WordPress stuff for free, if you want to take it, repackage it, and charge for it, that's totally fine. So when you look at the $10 billion a year flowing through the WordPress community, it's built on things, but it's also people building e-commerce shops and selling quilts or selling photographs or selling anything else. So it's enabled by WordPress. And we have this thing we push called Fire for the Future, which is the idea that if whatever you're getting out of WordPress, if you can put 5% back into essentially things that benefit the community, not just you, it avoids the tragedy of the commons. This sort of thing that is common in open source and in lots of things, that everyone kind of overmines a shared resource and then it dries up. It doesn't get the investment or the caretaking it needs to be truly sustainable. I think 5% is actually a good rule of thumb, and that can be given back in terms of time, money, donations. It's just basically saying, 5% of the time or 5% of my resources I'm going to put back towards things that benefit the world. And that, I think if the whole world did that, it'd be a much better place.
Why do you want to keep doing it? Isn't it time to exit? Let someone else step in and do all of the work. Aren't you ready to let go? No, I'm not. Because if I wasn't doing this, I would be missing it because I really enjoy it. I have fun. There's a great sense of accomplishment whenever you work with a group of people and when you put together an amazing WordCamp. And it has nothing to do with any kind of recognition, any kind of business decision. It really is about, this is truly what I enjoy doing. It's a hobby.
It's community over competition, right? It's like, how can we build this thing that everyone has a piece of the pie, everyone has a way to impact the world with their thoughts and their beliefs, and I think that that's why I feel passionately about it. I like the idea that everyone is welcome and everyone can create and everyone can change.
WordPress is a tool. It's a canvas, a blank canvas, and people can paint on it something beautiful, or they can paint something very hateful and ugly. I do believe that as humanity becomes more connected, as we interact with each other more, that does start to break down probably the biggest myth of modernity, which is that we're all separate, because we're not. And the more that people learn that and connect with their fellow humans and other things in nature, we realize that we're all part of the same system, all part of the same thing. The actions of one impacts everything else in the system, whether that's the planet, the climate, nature, animals, space. Who knows where it goes?
The internet is a work in progress. We can't tell you everything about it because it's changing every day.
That's right. In fact, the best advice we can give you is get on it and start exploring.
Let's go.
I have seen some familiar names there. That was produced by Mark Monder and Kathy Zantz. You might know from some of their WordFence work. But I thought this was a beautiful contribution to the WordPress world, and they're actually going to be submitting it to festivals coming up. So hopefully this can make it into South by or one of the other great festivals. If you have any pull with any of those, please get in touch with Mark or someone, see if we can get it in. But a good illustration as well of the different types of contributions. So when I saw a preview of it, that was my first time seeing the final cut. thought, wow, could we premiere that at State of the Word? That'd be kind of cool. So thank you all for joining that. So to officially jump in, howdy St. Louis. I'm told that this place is also called the Lou. Is that something y'all say? Do people from the UK look at you funny? This is actually not my first time in St. Louis. I was back here for a happiness meetup in 2011, which was my first exposure to a city museum. And of course, I'm familiar with the St. Lunatics and other culture ambassadors you have out there in the world. Though I was not aware that St. Louis hosted the World's Fair in 1904. And in fact, many amazing technological innovations have come out of here, including the wireless telephone, X-ray machines, electric streetcars, and the first prototypes of personal automobiles, which back then were both gas and electric. So it took like 100 years to come back to the electric. So it seemed fitting to have the event here and also to look at where WordPress has been and where we're going to go. This event was brought to you by 47 organizers, 122 volunteers, and 90 speakers yesterday and today. This event was also brought to you by the sponsors that make it so that the ticket is so inexpensive. Thank you to Bluehost, WooCommerce, Jetpack, and Google. So, as we head into the final months of 2019, with actually our earliest WordCamp US in a while, it's going to take a time to reflect on everything that we've worked together on, collaborated, our accomplishments, and just everything been going on with this year. We've had 2 core releases so far this year. The first, WordPress 5.1, named for Betty Carter, included the first iteration of this site health screen, which some of you might be familiar with. Got a few fans. The idea behind this is that, again, WordPress is all about empowering users, and we wanted to put the information and the tools in the hands of users as well to keep their site running in tip-top shape. As we power an ever-increasing percentage of the web, it is our responsibility and behooves us to try to make sure that portion of the web is safe, secure, up-to-date, and running the latest and greatest stuff. So this gives people information they can either use themselves or get in touch with their support, hosting, or things like that. We had a lot of developer experience improvements in 5.1, including the cron API. This is kind of the thing that runs in the background of WordPress that makes actions happen at certain times. So let's say you schedule a post. Have you ever wondered how that actually gets posted at the time when you schedule it? We have kind of a weird cron thing built into WordPress. We've enhanced it now so that advanced hosts or hosts that have a lot of cron scheduled tasks can hook into that and make it more efficient. We also, for the multi-site fans in the room, added a site meta feature, which gives developers a more performant way to store arbitrary data as opposed to just dumping everything in options like we used to. 5.2, named for Jaco Pastorius, came out in May. This one was pretty exciting because what you see on the left there is the old widget screen, and on the right is the new widgets, all available within Gutenberg, which also means that you can edit them in line and see exactly what they're going to look like in the real-time Gutenberg interface. I did a quick iteration based on feedback from y'all saying that there were a lot of blocks. Good problem to have. So we made it for yourself or for your clients. You could hide or show certain blocks. We have a block manager. And then finally, you shouldn't see this anymore. WSOD stands for the white screen of death. I guess originally it was called this because it was a play on the blue screen of death that Windows used to famously have. But basically what this means, if you visit your site, you see this, there was probably some sort of PHP error or something that is preventing your site from loading. And unfortunately, that makes it also hard to fix your site if it's erroring out. So now, when something like this happens, particularly from an auto upgrade or a plugin upgrade, you'll get a special email with a link that lets you basically navigate to a URL which deactivates the plugin before it loads and allows you to then turn it off and get back into your site. So again, this is just an example of something coming up from users, coming up from the support forums that we've identified as common barriers in our user experience and did a lot of work to try to rectify. WordPress 5.3 is coming out on November 12th, so just around the corner. This is not a pre-announcement of the Jazzer. We always do that on the day. So you'll see which Jazz person is named for, but it is a very, very exciting release for a number of things. We have over 150 block editor improvements. So some of you might not know, but the version of Gutenberg that's been shipping with WordPress 5.2 is a few months out of date now. And there's been lots of updates since then, as I will talk about more later. But I'm very, very excited to get all the Gutenberg improvements in the hands of a wider audience. It's also coming with a new default theme. This is 2020. It is a Gutenberg first, beautiful CMS-powered theme with an original design contributed by Anders Noren, and then, of course, expanded by the 2020 team. It is really slick. I have switched my own site, ma.tt, over to it, and it really highlights some of the power of Gutenberg, so I highly encourage checking it out. If you would like to get involved in some of the final, I guess we're basically done, but if you want to see the code behind it and some of what went into it, you can check it out on GitHub as well. In the vein of improving things for administrators and making WordPress easier to run for everyone, we've put in a little screen that just kind of verifies your admin email, which is separate from your user email. So we would send out emails like when things were auto-updating or when things broke, but we found that a lot of people had set up that email when they first started and never looked at it again. So now about every 6 months, you'll get like a little, hey, is this still your best email type screen. Again, these things seem simple, but it's a foundation on which we can build a lot else on, because now we can start to make more things dependent on that admin email. Then also 5.3 is going to have some more developer stuff. There's going to be so much Gutenberg, but I'll talk about that later. We did time and date component fixes that probably at least 3 people here in the audience know about. Let's raise your hand if you know what those mean. Pretty savvy audience. That's at least 40. And we, of course, updated to be compatible with the latest PHP 7.4, which is, of course, faster and better than ever. It was also a year where we raised the minimum PHP version of WordPress. We ended support for PHP 5.2 to 5.3, and I have an interesting stat that for people running WordPress 5.2, which is our latest stable release, 83% on PHP 5. Or PHP 7 or later. So we are seeing people who are updating WordPress are also updating PHP, which is very exciting. However, as we were digging into these stats, we found something else, which is about 10% of all the WordPresses we're tracking are on older versions of PHP. So we think this might be contributing to some people being sort of stuck on some older versions of WordPress, that it seems that they are running a higher percentage than the general population of older versions of PHP, which we track going all the way back to 5.0. I know. So we still have a lot of work there. 10% of the WordPresses on the world still on too old to upgrade PHP ends up being a lot of them. You could call that about 3% of the web. So it sort of woke me up to the fact that we're going to need to really dive into these and work with the web host and the people excuse me, hosting them, try to get in there to get these on the latest and greatest. While this has all been going on, there's been a ton of fun stuff happening on the mobile side of WordPress, which is a crucial, important for user adoption part that sometimes we forget about in the day-to-day development. So of the 38 core blocks that are in Gutenberg, we have now ported 10 of them to mobile, and we got Gutenberg on mobile in the first place. So congrats to that team. So the block editor is now available on both iOS and Android devices, including one additional block coming out in the release coming out on Monday. We are almost done with offline support, which means you will be able to blog and use the WordPress app on a plane, train, or automobile when you are not connected, or maybe even at a conference like this. And we have a dark mode done on iOS, and that will be coming to Android in a matter of weeks. Of course, the people side of WordPress, as we just heard from that the open film is one of the most exciting. And the events and people side of WordPress has had an exciting year as well. In 2019, there will be 141 WordCamps. Those are the big ones all over the world, 34 of those in brand new cities. We also have this new thing, 17 of which, and one of which tomorrow, called Kids Camps, which is, events adjacent to WordCamps designed specifically for our younger contributors. In fact, I believe at this camp we had one of our youngest, here at WordCamp US, one of our youngest speakers ever. Can we confirm that? Yeah? 4 at what age? Let's call it 14 or 15. So very, very excited for a new generation. It's a little scary to also think that they weren't born when WordPress started. I know if that made any of y'all feel old. It definitely made me feel a little advanced. We've had over 5,000 meetups. The WordPress Meetups are the more like monthly events happening all over the world in almost every city. And 16 Do Action charity hackathons. So this is where WordPress volunteers and community members come together and create websites for nonprofits and set them up to just have a beautiful web presence. This was also a year when we started bringing in more of the people's stories to the WordPress.org blog, our news site. So the icon on the left is HeroPress. If you haven't come across HeroPress before, highly recommend checking it out. And maybe you might even have a story you want to share there. HeroPress is a community site which highlights the journeys of how people came to WordPress and the effect it's had on their life and the effect they've had on WordPress as well. We started highlighting one of these per month on the WordPress.org blog, and it's been really, really exciting to get to know more of the people behind WordPress. And in fact, many of them are stories that are new to me as well, so it is a must-read for me every month. There was a bittersweet part, or a sad part of 2019 as well, that we did lose some community members, notably Viper 007 Bond, also known as Alex Mills, who's a longtime contributor, friend and colleague. I also recognize that many people might have lost other folks in the community, so I did want to take just a brief moment of silence to remember and thank those who are no longer with us. Alex was an amazing contributor to WordPress, a great friend, a great colleague. Automatic is putting together a scholarship to parallel the Kim Parcells Scholarship that's been going on for a few years now that brings someone to WordCamp US. And this will be targeted at a plugin developer who hasn't had the chance to visit WordCamp US yet. And so there'll be a full scholarship, full ride for them. And the beautiful part of this is actually Alex's story mirrors that quite a bit. His mom was telling me where he was a little bit more introverted, but he found out there was going to be a WordCamp nearby to him. Even though he'd been a big contributor, he had never been to any of the events, and that was part of what allowed him to blossom into finding a new set of friends, a new community, a job at Automatic, kind of everything that changed for him in that kind of last decade. It has been a very, very eventful 11 months. We've had lots of ups and downs. That's what this graphic is illustrating. But we've had thousands of people come together as well. I do want to rewind a little bit and talk about where we were just about a year ago. So close your eyes and imagine that WordPress 5.0, probably the biggest change we had ever made to WordPress in its 16-year history, came out the day before WordCamp US started in Nashville. We had people coordinating work from airplanes. There were impromptu groups of core developers testing and packaging the release in the hallways. The polyglots and marketers support teams were just scrambling to get everything ready. And of course, we had that snazzy release video. That was a pretty controversial year, that year. We came together and decided to make this big change because we wanted to, well, first, disrupt ourselves. We wanted to empower more WordPress users to realize our mission of democratizing publishing. And we want to make the web a more open and welcoming place. But Gutenberg got some feedback. These are all real tweets or quotes from articles. I don't want to pile onto the Gutenberg hate, but come on, this is nowhere near ready. I think it's safe to say I absolutely, capitals, hate the Gutenberg editor on WordPress now. and a lowercase p to pour salt in the wound. Gutenberg is just plain terrible and barely functional. A design should make my life easier, not harder. And finally, don't update to WordPress 5.0. You know, there was lots and lots of feedback on that, and I think we learned a lot, both in the process, but also in how we can communicate change better in the future. Although there are no changes on the horizon as big as Gutenberg was. You know, think of that as like, you know, when batters swing with a couple bats before they go up to the mound. We've now had really good practice for any future changes we want to make. I think that we also have a great opportunity when we make big changes in the future, sort of build that trust in the conversations around testing, using GitHub for development, things like accessibility. So I understand why we had a lot of this feedback, but we did get through it together. So thank you. We have had, since that 5.0 release, 20 releases of the Gutenberg plugin. So the pace of iteration of Gutenberg has kept up. And I'm also very, very proud to say, because there was some discussion around contributions, that the number of Gutenberg contributors since 5.0 has grown from 200 to over 480, over doubling year to year. I'm also very, very excited to say that even as WordPress becomes more advanced, we incorporate new technologies, you're all learning JavaScript deeply, is that we're going to have the most contributors we ever had to WordPress ever this year. So in 2018, we had about 594 contributors. This year, so far, we're at 1,122 unique contributors. Thank you. Also, thank you for clapping. It allows me to take a drink. If you want to throw some more in there. The current release, version 5.3, coming out November 12th, is set to have the most contributors of any release in our history by over 100 people. I'm also happy to say that the adoption of Gutenberg is going fantastic. We have over 2.7 more sites using Gutenberg than not. And this is actually probably undercounting because we're subtracting everyone using the classic editor from this. But of course, those of you who might be using the classic editor know, by the way, classic editor is a plugin we promoted very heavily with the upgrade to 5.0 that allowed people to still use the old editor as well as using the new editor. But it actually, classic editor doesn't turn off Gutenberg. It allows you to toggle between them. So you can decide on a per post basis what you want to use. So we believe some interesting number, I don't have any exact thing, but interesting number of the classic editor users are actually also using Gutenberg as well. We just passed, 2 days ago, 50 million posts made with Gutenberg. And that number is going up fast. We're seeing over 270,000 per day. And again, this is a subset of the posts that we're tracking. This is only folks running the Jetpack plugin that we get this stat from. So there is even a larger, that is the floor of where that number actually is. So to look at where Gutenberg is today and to talk about some of the development and work we've been putting into it, first and foremost, I want to talk about performance. I am so proud of the team for this graph. So what you see on the left there is the average seconds to load from version 5.0, then all the way on the right is release candidate 2 of version 5.3. So we've halved the time it takes to load Gutenberg and the post and edit screen. We also, one of the things that we noticed when we first launched is that the actual typing lag for all the complex things we were doing in Gutenberg was fairly high. So that has gone from 170 milliseconds in 5.0 now down to 53 milliseconds. Again, down by 2/3 in terms of the speed that's going in there. We put in some fun user enhancements. So for example, when we first launched, when you move blocks around, which is what you're seeing on the left, they used to just pop around, we've added motion. So now you kind of can see what's going on. It just feels a lot better. And of course, this also respects the motion sensitivity settings that you can set in your browser for accessibility. We added a typewriter mode. So this is pretty fun because, like a classic typewriter, it keeps your vertical place as you type. So this avoids jarring jumps or cases of typing near the bottom of the screen. Just a much more pleasant editor experience and something that now I want from every single editor I use. We added block previews. So what you're seeing here is now when you Because the blocks, when it was just the icon and the name, you'd never know. We recreated a little bit of the mystery meat problem we were trying to solve. So what the block previews do is show you right next to it exactly, or a preview of what the block is going to look like, and it allows for more explanation. So if you were clicking on something and you're like, what is masonry? Which is a fair question to ask. It'll show you that that's actually what we call these cool tiled galleries, kind of Pinterest-style galleries. We created a quick navigation mode, which helps with both usability and accessibility for you to be able to navigate through blocks with a keyboard. And you can press Escape to go into that navigation mode. What is coming for Gutenberg? Because I'm even more excited about the catch-up that we're doing in version 5.3. This is the simplest thing, but wow. We actually found, we've been gathering some stats on what people are searching for Gutenberg blocks. And one of the very, very top things was social icons. These are like the NASCAR stickers of the web. they're everywhere. But you can now add icons any place you can put a Gutenberg block, and we created a really nice interface for doing so. A huge project that we've been working on is taking the navigation menu. So this is what previously was an entire screen inside of WordPress with its own everything. That's what you see on the left. And making it an inline Gutenberg block that still supports all the same functionality and even adds some new. So what you're seeing there is a color picker, which previously wasn't even something you could do with the old navigation editor. By the way, you might notice we renamed it from menus to navigation. This is going to make all the restaurant users of WordPress understand it a lot faster. Real issue we've run into in testing. We've created the ability to do gradients in Gutenberg and a gradient tool. This was actually pretty fun because it's a fairly complex interaction, but we were able to put it together in a exciting way. So you can create blocks like it's 1999 again. That, of course, pairs well with our multi-button block, another thing. These seem basic, but these are things that we were running into quite a bit that people were asking for. We're now a year into the idea and the reality that there's going to be 1,000 blocks blooming. So people are creating blocks left and right, and it's really exciting to see what's going on. So one of the things that I'm most proud of the team of for doing as well is they have a block directory. So what this is that you're going to be able to install blocks in the block directory completely inline. So what you just saw happen right there was, what was happening in the background rather, is someone typed in a block they were looking for, they didn't find anything. It called out to the centralized WordPress.org block directory, they clicked add it, and what happened was essentially like a plugin got installed, activated in the background, and the block was available to insert completely instantly, completely in line with no page loads or anything. This is also really fun because as the block directory grows to incorporate hundreds and thousands of blocks, you can use those building blocks just in line as what you're doing. We are also going to expand this to include patterns. Block patterns are what we're calling collections of blocks. So if you could imagine like a testimonial pattern or slider type things, basically collections of the basic building blocks that take the most common patterns that you see on websites all over the world and make them accessible to install with just a single click. The idea here, and what we're really trying to enable with these fundamental building blocks, is that you could look at any website in the world and build that inside of WordPress with just a few clicks. It is coming. On the community side of things, we've also seen some pretty cool examples. This is the Mortgage Bankers Association, a site built by RTCamp, and they created a block template for their newsletter functionality. So what's actually happening right here is they are building an email newsletter in line with Gutenberg. To give a quick call out to WordCamp Phoenix, any folks from Phoenix here? Nice. Which also got a little call out in the film. Also made me realize how weird the word Phoenix is when you look at it. It's like the word weird. You're like, is that O or E there? This is 100% blocks, and in fact, many of the WordCamps, including WordCamp US, are now building their entire sites just using Gutenberg and blocks. 9 Publishing is using the interface, and 2 newsrooms for different mailouts they're doing for Gutenberg. They estimate that they are saving 15 hours a week for editors across both newsrooms when they implemented this Gutenberg interface. Finally, Pragmatic created a plugin which takes a client-created Word document, not WordPress, Word, and associated images, imports the content directly into Gutenberg editor, and using a combination of core and custom blocks, basically makes it ready to go into their publishing system, which again, super, super cool. Could we do a quick round of applause for these folks building on top of Gutenberg? And also for deciphering the Word document format. It's impressive in and of itself. Last year, remember, it actually came up in the Q&A where someone asked what percentage Gutenberg was done. And I said we're about 10% done. I'm very excited to say that we're now about 20% done. So the important changes, and part of why we made the investment in Gutenberg, was this is the fundamental foundation that we're going to build the next decade of WordPress under. And so we'll do about 10% per year. But already as we get to 20%, it is incredible, humbling, and awe-inspiring, everything that people are able to create with what's in there already. To give a quick reminder, there are going to be 4 phases of Gutenberg. We are, I would say, on the tail end of the easier editing phase. This is where we're tackling all the usability problems we had in TinyMCE and our former editors, where people having trouble manipulating embeds, shortcodes, images, basically getting the layouts and formatting that they wanted with the old editor. We have increased that usability tremendously. And the Gutenberg team still does at least 1 usability test per week and posts them at least once a month to the Make blogs, showing kind of the progress of those kind of real world, not people who are in this room, people new to WordPress, how are they able to use this interface? We're currently in the thick of the second phase, phase 2, which is all around customization. To give you a little update there, we have completed converting all the widgets to blocks, block customization, navigation menu, which isn't a plugin, but it's going to come in core, the widget block screen, and customize our widgets panel with block support. We are finishing up a block pattern directory and implementing full site editing. You like how I slipped the biggest thing there just as a final bullet point? But it is coming along, and there's a light at the end of the tunnel. As a quick reminder, the final 2 phases, the third one is going to be collaboration, which is where we take everything that you see in Gutenberg and make it so that you can real-time co-edit with anyone else who is editing the same things that you are, and also think a lot and invest some development into the workflow around changes and sharing changes, previews, etc. And then finally, last, we're going to tackle the Babelfish problem and have multilingual support, core to WordPress and core to Gutenberg. And Europe always gets super excited about that. We're still at the very, very beginning of this journey. We've been doing Gutenberg for about 2 years now. There were 47 releases prior to 5.0 coming out. We've had 20 since then. But it's the community, all of you, that really make WordPress great. It was so interesting how quickly the individual interviews in that film all went back to that same word, community, community. There's so many parts of how you can get involved with WordPress. And I want to talk about some of the ways, or some of my suggestions for if you're watching this, either the 1,000-something people here in this room, or the many on the live stream, or the folks who are going to watch this later, ways that you can get involved in being a co-creator of WordPress. First is helping be the change. And you might have heard, before every single talk we've given, that tomorrow there's going to be a contributor day. So if you are able to get to one of the big WordCamps, there's typically a contributor day afterwards. And what this is kind of like the real-life version of what we have online. So instead of going to a make.wordpress.org P2 and seeing what's going on, there will be a physical table for all the people who are passionate about localization, all the people working on the editor, all the people working on whatever that is. And you can walk over that table and be part alongside the people who make WordPress. I love this concept, and it's one of the most powerful things in the world, that with every bit of technology that you interact with every day, someone made that. And with WordPress, which many of you interact with every day, it's probably someone sitting here in this room, and you could very easily become one of them. So go by the contributor day to get involved. Another fun thing is the Gutenberg plugin is still there. So when people upgrade to 5.0, we turned off the Gutenberg plugin for them automatically, because we had, I think, over 1 million testers before. But about 275,000 people have turned it back on. This means that they are getting those weekly or fortnightly updates to the Gutenberg plugin before those things get shipped into core. So if you would like to see the latest and greatest of what Gutenberg could be, and there's a very active feedback channel there for reporting bugs. Basically, if you'd like to help define what's coming next in core Gutenberg, install this plugin. It's also neat because it kind of gets you the latest and greatest before the core release comes out. We've also been doing a lot of experiments with beta plugins to allow us to test features before they go into core. And one that's pretty small still, only a little over 100 sites running it, but I'd like people to check out and participate with, is Design Experiments. So this is where we're actually able to make user interface changes to WordPress in a plugin before we put it into core, and can get feedback and also do user testing on this. Basically, one of the best things we learned from Gutenberg is that we don't need to be beholden to the core release schedule, which at our best is 3 times per year, to be able to rapidly iterate and get changes in the hands of users. Users are the oxygen for any software, and without it, you don't really know, despite whatever planning what you might do, you don't really know how people are going to use and interact with the software. So it's really, really important. I want to highlight this fun tweet from someone who actually reinstalled the Gutenberg plugin. This is Hannah Smith said, "Installed the Gutenberg plugin today, which upgrades the features that ship with core. I wanted the cover block, and I was curious to check it out. OMG! Exclamation point, exclamation point. It's like 1,000,000 times better. If this stuff goes in the core, we're all in for a treat. Well done to all the contributors." So you can be like Hannah. There are 3 exclamation points in this tweet, which is pretty impressive for 280 characters. That's a high percentage of exclamation points to the rest of the characters in the tweet. We need more blocks. So one of the most exciting ways to expand the kind of window of what people are able to do with WordPress today is creating more of those blocks. So if you're building sites for clients or friends or yourself, and you find yourself needing something that Gutenberg doesn't yet support, and you have the technical wherewithal, you've learned JavaScript deeply and are able to build it, share that, please. Particularly if it's JavaScript only and can go in our block directory. As the blocks increase, it's almost like the people using the canvas of WordPress are getting new colors and textures and paintbrushes they can use. And the things that get created are so inspiring. Also, if you have that technical wherewithal or know a lot about WordPress, think about helping teach the change. So every single person who contributes to WordPress pretty much at some point had someone else help them get involved. That's part of why we have the contributor days. It's part of why we make all of our meetings open on Slack and put all the notes on P2 and just try to have the whole development of WordPress be as open as possible, is that teaching aspect. It's really one of the only places in the world as well you can sort of work alongside developers who create the software that runs a third of the web. And so if you wanted to learn better PHP or better JavaScript, I can think of no better kind of master class or real world studio with which to do that. If you're interested in learning more, hopefully you made it to the Get Involved booth, which was here at the event. But if not, come to Contributor Day tomorrow. Someone will be happy to walk you through things. Or check out make.wordpress.org, because we all make WordPress together. Sharing your knowledge can also come through events and meetups. This is a map of all the meetups happening all over the world. Looks like even Greenland's. Not Iceland, though. Come on, Reykjavik. What's going on? As you can see, all over the world, there is probably a WordPress meetup near you. And if there's not, like let's say you're in Iceland, you could start one. And these are really, really fun ways to bring community together and also allow you to experience the best part of WordPress, which is the people. The software is pretty good, but the people are amazing. In 2020, we're also going to redo our regional events, WordCamp US and WordCamp Europe, and we're going to add a new one, which is WordCamp Asia for the first time. These regional events are fantastic for bringing together contributors in particular. So you get a lot of the local WordCamp organizers, a lot of the meetup folks come to these regional WordCamps and can really share and learn at a very, very high level. I believe WordCamp Asia will be in February, and this first year will be in Bangkok, Thailand. So if you've ever wanted to visit there, good excuse to. And WordCamp Europe is going to be Porto. Oh my God, that's right. I love Porto. Porto in Portugal, also where port is from, if you ever enjoyed a good port. So check that out. And WordCamp US will be right back here in St. Louis. I might need to come a week early just to go to like City Museum every day. I did not realize there was a roof, which makes me wonder. I was kind of wondering with my sister actually. Makes me wonder how many floors in between where I got to and where the roof was that I missed. Oh my goodness. We've apparently had more social media posts and tweets and Tumblr posts and WordPress blog posts, everything, this WordCamp than we've ever had. And I've been following it as well, the WCUS tag. And it's been really, really fun to kind of live vicariously through parts of this event I was at but did not see. Why are we doing all this? We're trying to help open the web. There is a very natural pendulum that swings both in societies and technology and in the web between open and closed. And as it swings back towards open, it doesn't happen for free, it doesn't happen automatically. It happens through a lot of hard work from people like here in this room, creating the type of web that we want to live in and we want the people going to kids camps and their children to live in. We are putting together for WordPress two final things that I'm going to plug. First is now on wordpress.org/news. We are doing our annual survey, which is a very exciting way to show for our corner of the web what is going on and the technologies and things that are happening. We're also translating this into, I believe, 6 or more languages. So we'll be able to, for the first time, or for better than we have in the past, get feedback from the non-English parts of WordPress as well. And then finally, a little surprise announcement for y'all is you saw a lot of talk for 5 for the Future. Just to briefly reiterate, 5 for the Future is this idea that if WordPress is a big part of your life, try to think how you can take 5% of your time, however that might be defined. It could be money, resources, colleagues, whatever it could be, to put back into the comments so that the kind of core WordPress, which is, again, built largely by people here in this room, can grow and get better and be something that sort of we can benefit from and future generations can benefit from too. So if you go to wordpress.org/5, you can type the number or spell it out. We now have a directory. This actually, I believe, came up in a question maybe last year. It might have been WordCamp Europe over here, which is there a way we can highlight the people who are contributing the 5 for the Future? So what this allows is either for individuals or organizations to pledge and show everything they are sort of pledging and committing to WordPress, and you can browse them. And then, of course, if you are ever trying to hire an agency or web host or something like that, definitely take a look at the 5 for the Future page to see which organizations back to WordPress. and try to vote with your wallet to support the folks who are really making sure that WordPress can continue for many years and decades to come. All right, that's all I got. Oh, actually, wait. There's one more thing. Are y'all ready for this? So, this entire presentation was actually in Gutenberg. So this was all on a web page. And in fact, the speaker view, which I'll bring over here, is another web page. And this was all edited. Let's see if I click this, what will happen. All edited inside of WP Admin through Gutenberg. Also, kind of amazing it didn't break, right? Let me make this full screen again. Wait, bring this window back. Oh, I lost it. Presenter, speaker view. I'll bring that back. Full screen. And this code is all on GitHub. We'll be releasing it. And can we give a quick round of applause for, stand up if you were working on this. Ella, Mel, Mark, Tammy. There was so much code happening till about like 25 minutes ago. I am impressed and amazed that that came together so well. So congratulations on that. All right, now really we can go to question and answers. So just a quick sort of guidelines for here. We'll have 2 mics up here in the front, so you can kind of walk up and line up, and we'll get to them. A light will briefly shine on you when you're going to ask your question, and say your name, where you're from, and try to make it a question.
Hello, Matt. Ryan Kinney from Miami. As a volunteer, speaker, organizer, and contributor that passionately supports WordPress and our shared mission to create a more open and accessible web, I'm concerned because I don't believe that we currently have a stated accessibility policy, community code of conduct, conflict of interest policy, code of ethics, diversity and inclusion policy, or privacy policy. Between the foundation and, so my question is 2-part. The first is, between foundation and the project, who would be responsible for assisting us in creating and enacting those policies? And the second part is, how as we as a community, how can we help make this happen and try to enact some of these policies over the next 12 months?
That is a good question, thank you. One thing, I do think we do have some of those policies in place. Like definitely we have a privacy policy. So we do have some of those already. Maybe we need to make them more discoverable.
Yeah, I don't believe that they're published. I'm a core contributor for privacy, and we've been working as a team on it, but I don't believe that it's been finalized and published yet.
Well, let's make sure. It should be in the footer of WordPress.org, but I believe we've had one of those for a little while. For the others, I would say that the first priority is always making sure that what the purpose of each of those policies is that WordPress is embodying. And I'm very proud with the improvements we made to all those areas in the past year and beyond, especially particularly accessibility. And that is in spite of there being a policy or not. We've tried to enact bigger changes in WordPress in a policy-first way in the past. And to be honest, it felt nice, but it didn't always make things actually change. So when we've said every commit must be XYZ or something like that, or just maybe had it as a broad policy, like I think we did one for accessibility on the theme directory once, it didn't have the same impact as when we actually built the tools or worked alongside folks to make the changes. So I do think about that. I also think about how can we make all of these policies that be about things that we want people to do, not all negative framing. It was pretty noticeable when you came in here. Some of you might have noticed, like, the first 3 things you saw when walking into WordCamp US were like costumes, weapons and a code of conduct. It's like, whoa! Like little placards for those following along at home. They're like big black and white placards saying what wasn't allowed mostly. I also want to, I think we've always done really well in WordPress where we don't try to enumerate every possible thing we don't want people to do, but really talk about the principles of what we want to create together. And I would love for us to also evolve how we present ourselves at WordCamps to incorporate more of that. Well, thank you. In terms of those other policies, let's talk about tomorrow at Contributor Day. So we can sort of dial in which ones are there versus not and talk about what might be a good process for getting the rest out there.
Perfect. I look forward to that. Thank you, Matt.
Thank you so much. See you then. All right, we're going to bounce to the left.
Hi, I'm Alicia from Canada. And I was just really happy to see a number of security talks this year. And there was one this morning on auto updates where I learned that there's like 80,000 plugins now for WordPress, which is awesome. But I work for Security, and we know that a lot of sites get hacked through plugin vulnerabilities, not through core vulnerabilities. Yeah. So I'm curious about the future of auto updates for plugins. But my main question is, most users don't know this. So how can WordPress and the community better inform administrators, or maybe even email, somehow notify them about security risks of delaying plugin vulnerabilities, the potential risks of breaking sites with auto updates, and some alternatives like virtual patching?
That is a super good question. And one of the things that is one of the 9 focuses for the year, I think it is super, super, super important. We're laying some groundwork. So like that admin email I just showed will allow us to we want to use that to message people, not just about core like we traditionally have, but also about the plugins they're using. So that is part of the reason for getting that in. And sometimes we have to build the foundation before we build the house on top of it. So that was one of the things that we realized we didn't really have a good up-to-date version of. Over time, very much the hill that or the mountain we're trying to climb in the distance is that you just log into WordPress and it's safe, secure, and you get the latest and greatest. And you shouldn't have to think about whether something's a plugin, whether it's in core, whether it's part of your theme, whether you customize your theme, but then there's a security update to a different part of it. Like, we need ways to handle all of these possible cases and update, at least for sites that allow us to, right? Set the file permissions as such, as many sites on the web as possible. I would like to call out and thank the web host here. So almost every major web host, certainly all the ones that we promote, do automatic updates of core for both major and minor releases. And that's been fantastic both for us, because that means people are getting the latest and greatest WordPress, but also for them, because that means the sites are less likely to get hacked or compare a 4-year-old version of WordPress to like today's proprietary alternative. The other thing that I'm starting to see more adopt, we do this on WordPress.com, lots of other hosts are starting to do it too, is auto-updating those plugins. So if you're a web host and you're not auto-updating plugins yet, figure out how to make that opt-out and get as many of your sites on the latest versions as possible. It is true that most vulnerabilities we've seen, and certainly the ones that have affected most sites, have been in plugins and themes. And themes are particularly hairy, right, because people might have customized the code there. But it's all just code. And so for sites that give us the permission to modify these things by the file permissions, I think that we'll be able to tackle it. It is really, really impressive what we already have. I know for those of you who are at the auto update panel, we had Nathan and a few others there. We forget that it wasn't that long ago, 5 or 6 years ago, that everyone had to update their WordPress manually. And we now get over a 99, usually 99.9 or 99.5 auto update rate. And allows us to get usually like 60% plus of the WordPresses in the world on the latest version within a few weeks, which is not as good as iOS, but way better than Android. So as a true platform, which WordPress really is, it is an operating system for the web that's going to power so many things that we know now and so many things we can't even imagine yet. It's really, really important that we invest in that auto-update mechanism.
Thank you.
So thank you. It's a great place to contribute, especially if you work on security stuff. Over here.
Yeah. Hi, Matt. My name is Monica. I'm from Joost and from the Netherlands. And so at Joost, we're really into Gutenberg, and we're making Guten blocks. We have a lot of schema updates in Gutenberg. But our research shows that only half of our customers use the block editor. Mm-hmm. And that's hard, because that means that we have to basically maintain 2 products. Mm-hmm. And I'm wondering if you know how we can convince more people to start using the block editor. Because there is a lot of negativity surrounding it, and we're trying to be supportive, but it's hard to get there.
And I saw you post some of these stats.
Yes, it was the post with the most comments we ever had.
I believe you're assuming that every user of Classic Plugin is not using Gutenberg, correct?
No, we did research within our audience and asked them, what are you using, Classic or the block editor? And half of them answered, we use the Classic editor.
Ah, so more of a survey?
Yes. Yes, I know surveys aren't all, but still it shows that a lot of people aren't using it. And
so we have about, just by the numbers, we think, like I said, almost 3 times as many are using Gutenberg than not. So we think only about 25% are kind of using the Classic editor of people who have updated, and not all of those are using the Classic editor all the time. Some of them are switching between Gutenberg. So it's 25% or below that are still on there. I think the way that we get people on is first improving Gutenberg.
Yeah.
Right, there's been so many changes. If you're one of those people who's not on Gutenberg yet, that's okay. We're still making it better. But I'd encourage you to take every couple months, like every 2 or 3 months, every major WordPress release, try it out again and see if the things that frustrated you have been addressed. 2, I think it's blocks. So you notice how on that tweet, Hannah talked about how I really want this cover block. I do believe that block-first adoption will really help things. And so as, for example, in Yoast, if, I'm just making things up, like let's say you had a really cool new feature that was Gutenberg only, that would be a great reason for people to upgrade. Though I say that knowing that y'all have done as much to contribute to Gutenberg as like anyone else in the world. So actually a quick round of applause, because pound for pound, Yoast gives more back than almost anyone. As CEO, I know a lot of that's due to you, so thank you.
Thank you.
So I think that is what's going to drive it along. But also, let's recognize that we're only a year in. We've got 75%. That last 25% will probably, it'll be like a parabolic curve. But I do think that, I mean, we still have 10% on versions prior to 5.6 of PHP. So I do think that will kind of asymptotically approach like a 85, 90%. And that's the point when, as plugin developers, I would say you can really focus on Gutenberg first for everything.
I just hope you're right.
I would be very surprised. I mean, we'll check this next year. We can update all these stats. I'd be very surprised if not 90% or more of all new posts going in WordPress next year were Gutenberg. So,
Thank you.
But we got a lot of work to do.
Yeah.
Right? Because think of it, also some of the stuff coming around the corner, like real-time co-editing. Right? I could see that being a really compelling feature for people that'll help them make the leap to Gutenberg. And of course, in Gutenberg, you can still use the classic block. So you can actually still have almost exactly the same interface inside of Gutenberg. So there's lots of reasons for people to upgrade.
Thank you.
Cool. Thank you very much. Let's see over here. I'll just check time. All right.
Hello, I'm Milana Zap from Serbia. So I'm born and raised in communism, and now we try to survive democracy. And yeah, so,
me too.
Yeah.
Oh, well, the second part.
So looking at open source project, the idea to me is closer to communism, but I wouldn't advise applying that. But also, democracy doesn't work. So I'm thinking, yeah. So my question is, looking at WordPress, I don't see any system there. And I wonder, when will we see something that we can identify as a system for making plans, making decisions, what are the names, something like that?
Yeah, that's a good question. I'll take at face value all your value statements on different political systems. And say that WordPress is going to look different, and maybe none of the political analogies directly apply, because it is software.
Yeah.
And
but
so
there are other open source projects that have some kind of system, and it works.
I think we should call what we do the WordPress system.
Okay.
To be honest, like
when will we see it?
It was actually one of I know the WP governance project kind of fizzled out, but one of the great outcomes I think was they kind of documented how decisions get made, the team structures for doing so. The good news is that, basically everything except, like choosing the jazz name for a release happens in a Slack or P2 or GitHub or Track channel somewhere. There's even, there's a contributor to WordPress who I was talking with, and they were like, what happened? The About page got made in like this secret process. I wanted to be part of it, and didn't realize that all just happened on Track. So almost everything you see happens as part of an open process. So there's a lot of transparency. And so for the actual organizational structure, I think that it's changed in the past. It will change in the future depending on who's contributing, their strengths and weaknesses, and what all organizational structures are a series of trade-offs. So what we're trying to optimize for at the time. So prior to when I took back over kind of the lead role, we would say that for each release, there was a release lead that had ultimate authority, including over myself, for what was going to be in that release. And the buck stopped there for everything. And what we were trying to do there was increase the sort of flexibility that release leads had, because we had gotten to a space where releases were a little more incremental, and we want people to feel the autonomy to do bigger things. So I would say that kind of like an outfit you try on for different outcomes that you're looking for. And these different organizational structures will try different things for different parts of WordPress. The key that for everything we do, I think, will be that transparency.
Yeah.
And of course that we're open source at the end of it, so that the product is something, just like that film was Creative Commons. That's so cool, that whatever we create as a community is available to the community as well. So thank you so much.
Thank you.
We needed, if you have any good words for that too, like what is kind of a transparent duocracy or something like that. All of these words have trade-offs, so.
Hi, my name is Paul Wilson. I'm from Hawaii. I actually came here on another conference, but I think most of your Southern California Automatic employees were on my same plane.
Cool.
And I learned about this WordCamp, so I jumped over to here. So, but I teach digital entrepreneurship at a university in Hawaii, and WordPress historically has been the main thing that we go to. And so I have two questions that deal with that in particular. First is the bullet point, and I want to make sure I got it right from your presentation, implementing full site editing. That kind of slipped in there at the end. And I feel that's what's really been eating at WordPress's market share, as you have Wix, Weebly, all the other ones that I see my students gravitating more because they like the customization of being able to edit full site without being restricted to themes. And so my question on that one is, we've seen acquisitions in the past, such as WooCommerce, where you've brought them in, and we've seen tools like Divi, Elementor, PageLayer that already have all of that in place. Is that something that you guys would consider to help make it more competitive and make it more realistic for people that are just getting started, where they can customize without having to be locked in theme-wise?
Totally. So a good way to look at it, there's probably at least 25 that I looked at of these page builders that would each have its own data model, each way of doing things for solving this problem that you said. So part of why we started in Gutenberg was to provide them kind of like a common Rails that they could all build on top of. So page builders, I don't think are going anywhere, but they won't need to reinvent the wheel of the basics, like the core CMS stuff, that'll now be handled inside of Gutenberg. They can build on top of that and create lots of cool things outside of there. The full site editing is basically the realization of the original promise of Gutenberg, which is what we wanted to do was essentially flatten WordPress. Take all these different concepts that you would learn in different places around WordPress and make them all blocks. So you could learn a block once and you knew that anywhere. And what we're doing with the customization phase is breaking out the post box. So right now, all those blocks we showed, by default, you can just have inside poster pages. We want you to have that in headers, footers, sidebars, wherever you want. So we're doing a lot of the work there to port things over. There's some more that needs to be done, like navigation block is still not finished. It's a very complex interaction. But certainly by this time next year, and hopefully in the early part of next year, we'll have it so your students and yourself will be able to take, like I said, look at any site on the web and just using some blocks, maybe the 2020 theme, be able to recreate that. So that is 100% where we're going. as far as I know, not going to acquire any of these plugins. But you also don't need to, right? Because the plugins are going to continue, and they're now going to be able to move faster and work together more, which is also something we hear users say. Because in the past, like choosing one of these is almost like locking yourself in to a particular way of doing things. And if you want to use a different theme or something else that's not compatible, you're still locked in. So this is a very user-centric model of trying to solve this problem for the entire WordPress ecosystem.
So on the second...
we got a lot of people waiting, so we're going to jump to some other questions.
Really quick on the... Well, it's not a really quick question. I'll let you jump over to it. Right. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Hello, and you've got the mic? Perfect.
I do. Hi, Matt. Michelle Ames from Give WP and WP Coffee Talk. And I would like to lighten this up for just a quick second and ask you a fun question.
Mm-hmm.
I ask every guest of my podcast, what's the biggest mistake you've ever made with WordPress and what did you learn from it? And what's your proudest WordPress moment?
The biggest mistake is a longer story. But there was a hot nacho episode is what it was referred to. Hopefully most people in the room haven't heard of it. A few have. But super early on with WordPress, it was basically like completely unfunded, and I had like run out of money, and we were hired a designer to redesign the logo. Actually, Jason Santa Maria, who did do the logo we currently use, but then ran out before he was going to do phases 2 and 3, which were redesigning the website and the WP admin. Anyway, long story short, like someone paid me to put these links on the website that were totally spammy. But it was kind of before web spam was a thing, and also might have inadvertently, didn't invent, but certainly popularized a way to hide content using CSS that Google was not yet aware of. And so that was definitely the worst thing I've done to WordPress and the web. My initial penance for that was creating a Kismet. Which was to create something to fight web spam, especially which I understood what people were doing there. But then hopefully the 15 years of WordPress following that. And one of the proudest, I get incredibly proud every time we come together for these big WordCamps, US, Europe. And last year, having 5.0 ship and being able to talk about it and see how the community came together. And I mean, that really was the biggest change we made in our 16-year history. And this idea of going from kind of a document model to a block model of editing it's impossible to overstate how important that is to the future of WordPress. So seeing how that came together and how we iterated in public, how it was, all that happened, is definitely one of my proudest WordPress moments.
Fantastic, thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, Matt. My name is Wolf Bishop. I'm with WP Top Hat, and I live right here in Southeast Missouri.
Cool.
So kind of home for me. I'm going to kind of screw up the trend that she just tried to set up with a bit of a more controversial subject.
It's okay.
One of the greatest things about WordPress is the fact that it's released under the GPL, which means we can use, redistribute, change plugins, themes, anything that's released under that license as much as we want, either for free or profit, and we love that about it. This has brought about a trend a growing trend of companies known as GPL clubs, which redistribute plugins either free or for profit. And there's a lot of controversy in the community about this. Some people are absolutely for it, and others are definitely against it. And this kind of attitude is mixed between both plugin or developers as well as end users. I've spoken to developers who support it, developers who are against it, same with end users. So I think the community might like to know what is your official or unofficial opinion about these types of companies?
Sure. First and foremost, I'll say it's allowed by the license. So it's something that is, at least in all the cases I'm aware of, that's the license. When we create GPL software, it's explicitly with that freedom. And we couldn't prevent folks like that from doing it without taking a lot of freedoms away from everyone here in this room. So it's one of those uncomfortable, almost like the First Amendment in the Bill of Rights. Sometimes it's uncomfortable, but it's really, really, really important. My personal view on it is that, the customers there will get what they pay for. Yes, they can get 100 plugins. Well, one, it's weird to pay in the first place if they're price sensitive, but they're not supporting any of those developers. They're not practicing Fire for the Future in their own case by voting with their wallet for the software that they use. support that. I mean, I've started now where I pay for stuff I don't even need to pay for. You know, donations or Patreons or stuff like that, just because I want to see more of it in the world. How you spend your money is just as important as how you spend your time and any other resource. You're supporting a certain worldview. You're going to encourage more of whatever you're paying for to happen. So if you're seeing companies, like some of the ones we've mentioned today, that are giving a lot back to WordPress, doing a GPL, creating great user experiences, supporting Gutenberg, all that sort of stuff, even if you don't need to, maybe just pick up their yearly license or something. And think of that as a way of supporting more of what you want to see in the world. And you know, for these companies that are kind of taking lots of people's work but not really giving much back, either to those core things or to core, I'd say maybe.
Safe to say that I'm from a different generation from most of the people in the room. So my question to you is, how do you think WordPress, or it's either how do you think WordPress is going to be adapted by the next generation of kids in K through 12 schools? Or how do you think you're going to change WordPress so that way kids in K through 12 schools will want to learn WordPress and want to join the local WordPress meetups, like how they joined robotics and different things? Thank you.
Well, first, thank you. I believe, Olivia, you were one of the speakers at this WordCamp, right?
Yes.
Very modest. So the example that you're setting is something that inspires. So this is going to be on YouTube later, and boys and girls, maybe of your generation, will see you here asking a question, being a speaker at WordCamp in front of 1,000 adults. And you know, it's kind of beautiful. When I got started with WordPress, I was 19. And you know the old comic in the New Yorker, like, on the internet, no one knows you're a dog? I would think, like, it's great. On the internet, no one knows that I'm a 19-year-old kid in Houston who doesn't have a comp sci degree and, like, is learning to code. People just were looking at the code I was creating, and we started working together, and we're able to create something that became a community, became a product that powers a lot of the web, and that I'm still excited to work on every single day when I wake up. So those examples being out there, I think, really help. The HeroPress stories, we probably need some more younger folks on HeroPress. See Topher somewhere here. You know, just kind of get more of that out there. Kids camps, I think, will help. And finally, you know, we need to, well, this isn't finally, we need to make WordPress easier and more accessible. That will help with younger generations as well as older generations. And the last plug I'll put in there is, you know, something that happened this year was Automatic, which is my company, bought Tumblr. And we announced that we're going to switch all that to WordPress. So there's going to be 500 million more WordPresses in the world. And Tumblr definitely has a younger audience on it as its primary user base. And so I'm very, very excited as, you know, it's not going to be the first year, but probably second or third year. As those become WordPress on the back end, Tumblr.com can be like a React front end talking to the WordPress API. And it can have a different user interface on top of that. And those folks, much like before WordPress, there's a generation that learned to code, you know, CSS from MySpace and things. Like, by going where there's a lot of youth activity happening already, and it's a pretty fun site as well, the customization and the path we have there could allow them to graduate to being WordPress and maybe graduate to being someone as cool as you, talking at WordCamp someday. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Hi, Matt. Becky Davis from Chicago. And I've been doing this a long time. I have sites that are out there that are 6 and 7 and 8 years old, and I'm still maintaining them, and they have thousands and thousands and thousands of posts in multiple languages. And you want me to switch over to Gutenberg? Are you kidding me?
I do, but you don't have to.
Right. So my real question is, I've heard rumors that the classic editor is going to die in the future. Please tell me that's not true.
What did we officially announce for a classic editor? 2022?
Yeah, that's not cool.
Wow. There's a lot going to change between now and 2022
I
in the world in general. Like, we'll all be like doing WordCamp on holograms or something. But So I think it went from Gutenberg release, we said 4 or 5 years, that we announced at that point that we were going to continue maintaining the classic editor plugin. In reality, in open source, when things have usage, it gets maintained. And so if classic editor still has a couple million users by 2022, guess what? It's going to keep going. Guess what? We're going to still work on it. If it makes you feel any better, again, but we don't want to promise that. It's just because that doesn't encourage what we want to happen, which is people start to adopt. And so hopefully some of those sites that are 6 to 7 years old, maybe as you start to update them for a new design or something else, that could be an opportunity to also bring them over to Gutenberg. Or maybe that's something their users or you as a developer want to bring in. Like I've definitely, by the way, I have WordPresses that are 16 and 17 years old. And it's been kind of fun to go back and see like things that I used to have to custom code or have a lot of HTML and custom CSS, I can now recreate in Gutenberg. That's a little bit of work, but it's also really, it's kind of interesting and I learn as I do it. And I know it's going to be forward compatible because Gutenberg 100% is the future of WordPress. Yeah. So if you were to ask me 20 years from now, is there still a classic editor? I mean, I hope not, but only because no one wants to use it. So sometime in between there, its usage will dwindle to the point where it'll maybe either be a niche plugin or not something officially supported. It's still open source, so that still means that people will be able to customize however they like. There's people who only post to WordPress using a command line. So use that as an example of some pretty niche things can still be actively supported and maintained. But I do appreciate if at some point in the future you take a look at Gutenberg again and try it out.
I'm trying to play with it on new projects, but on projects with thousands of pages, how do I transfer that? There's no script for that.
We should make a script for that then.
Make a script.
Thank you. All right, we'll do the last couple, maybe 2 or 3.
What's up, Matt?
Hey.
Hey! My name is Christy, and I have a question for you. You are a CEO, so you know, or you have consultants that know, that a key component of any successful project or organization is good stakeholder management. So this idea that in any group, we have a ton of people, and a lot of the time, most of the time, they have competing interests. Mm-hmm. If we have buyers and sellers, the buyer wants to get the most money, the seller wants to get the least money, and we have to find a place in between. I think we could argue that the WordPress open source project has even more stakeholders than the traditional corporate structure that maybe has employees, buyers, sellers, shareholders. I'm curious what we're doing in 2020 and beyond to bring all of the different people with different motivations together in the WordPress project to work towards a common goal. The questions that we see here demonstrate, I can probably list about 7 different kinds of stakeholders. Mm-hmm. Yeah, with different motivations, different incentives, different things they want to see. Mm-hmm. How do we get everybody working towards that same goal of what we saw in the video, which is making the project and the world a better place?
That is a good question. And I am so relieved you defined what stakeholder management was. Because for a moment there, I'm like, man, I'm a terrible CEO. I have no idea what she means by that. So
you got to thank Andrew Nason for that one, because he texted me and said, what's your question? And I said it, and he goes, you got to define stakeholder management.
Oh, thanks, Andy. Yeah, so I'm maybe not the most corporate CEO ever. In terms of, but I do think about that problem quite a bit, which is there are so many people with different types of interests, different incentives, different motivations, different things that are important to them, special interest within WordPress. And, you know, it can be cacophonous sometimes, right? Like all the voices in the room. I also think it's part of what makes WordPress beautiful and exciting, is that those voices occasionally come together and create like a chorus where we can all go in the same direction. We're never going to make everyone happy, and not everyone's ever going to agree with all of our decisions. I'm sure there's many things I presented today that a lot of people would strongly agree with or say would be bad for the web, which is opposite of our goals. But what we do try to do is put our philosophy out there of what we're trying to do, the web that we want to see, and the things that are really core to us. That came up in an earlier question, things like transparency and open source. And then say, if those are also important to you, you know, get on the bus and we'll take this journey together. If not, guess what? It's open source. So you can still, you can create evil press or something. And
Can?
Sure, it's open source. You can fork it, you can change it, you can take the code, you can not fork it, you can use it for whatever purpose you like. And so you're not forced. But if you do want to be part of this, what I would term more the community of people contributing to WordPress, we do have to think about how we present things. So it's state of the word, but it's also what happens at meetups, what goes on the blog, what gets translated into the 50+ languages that WordPress is translated into. It very much is a global and multifactorial problem that is part of the fun of it. It's, I was listening to I think it was a podcast with, who's the guy that does the documentaries like Vietnam, Jazz? Ken Burns, right? The one that has the awesome pan effect. How cool that he has effects built into iMovie. Like, to be a director, to have that, your name and the effect someday. And he was talking about, they have this neon sign in their editing room. And I'm going to butcher it, but I think it said, it's complex. Because he covers these really interesting, rich stories. And for everything, there's kind of a surface story, like the kind of tweet version that you can say about what happened in, gosh, something like the Civil War or music called jazz. But the reality is it's really, really complex. And I thought about getting like a neon thing that said that for my office after I heard that podcast. I think it was the podcast he recorded with Tim Ferriss, if you want to check it out. So thank you for your question.
Thank you.
All right, next to last.
Hey, Matt. My name is Jeremy Ward. I'm a senior backend engineer with Web Dev Studios. And I was excited to see in your presentation today and was aware of the decision last year to upgrade the minimum version of PHP. Mm-hmm. And it's great to hear 83% adoption, I believe you said it was, on WordPress 5.2. So 83% of people on WordPress 5.2 are running PHP 7 or higher. Right, exactly.
It's pretty cool.
And that's awesome. The goal for this year, as I understand it, was to get the minimum version of WordPress onto 7+. And of course, I think it's next month that security updates for 7.1 end. Mm-hmm. I'm just wondering, if you can elaborate on like the 10%, the laggards, the ones that are still on the old versions, and the conversations that you are planning on having with web hosts to get them up to date so that we can push everything forward.
Sure. So one common bit of info that a lot of people don't know is that web hosts that were running older versions of PHP, that the PHP project itself was no longer officially supporting, were still getting backported security fixes, usually from third-party companies that they would subscribe to or things like that. So although 7.0 will no longer be officially supported by the PHP project, it's a little bit like when we say we don't want to support old things. They just don't want to have to deal with it. They want to focus on making the new thing. But they're, web hosts often subscribe to services, and those people will still have PHP security updates. So it's not actually as end-of-life as the PHP project would like you to feel. In terms of what we need to do to pick up those old people, not old people, people on old versions of, sorry, I made a generational mistake there. People on old versions of PHP is, we got to work with the host. It's really something where, apart from a small handful that might be running like servers in their closet and on their home connection, like pretty much everyone runs WordPress on a web host, on a server image, on the great web hosts that sponsor WordCamps. And so one thing we're looking to start doing is start identifying which hosts have those older versions and just use that to talk to them. They might not even know themselves that they still have 500,000 WordPresses still on PHP 5.6 or something. So if we can expose that to them and kind of offer the best practices of what we've seen folks do to upgrade. By the way, this is also an area where I've seen direct competitors, hosts that compete with each other for the same customers, actually help each other out and open source their scripts and things that they use to do upgrades. Bluehost did some amazing stuff there. So we can bring these folks along, but it's not the end user that probably needs to hear it at this point because they've been seeing the notices and everything for a while now. It's that we need to start working with wherever they're paying to host their website.
Great, thank you.
Thank you. All right, and we're going to end on this one. I apologize. I know there's a few more questions, but I'm very cognizant of time. And for the folks that didn't get to it, come on up afterwards. I'm happy to talk to you. All right, so You've got the last question. Please introduce yourself. You're the celebrity that was on that video, right?
Now I just want to go and
Oh.
her down somewhere because it's a bit embarrassing. Hi, Matt. My name is Francesca. I'm the WordPress community manager at SiteGround, and right now I serve as the release coordinator for WordPress 5.3. That hopefully, yes.
November 12th, right?
November 12th. I'm just a shouty, bossy lady. Everyone else is doing the work. But one thing that I do, I
Not
also
bossy, you have executive management skills.
Yes, yes. Thank you, thank you. I'm also a good listener. So one thing that came up over this past few months in conversations with many different people involved in the release is that they feel it will be great to have a calendar of releases, a year-long calendar of releases. So how do you feel about having a calendar for 2020 for the next, because you said yourself 3 releases at best every year. So how do you feel about having a calendar for 2020?
This is a good one to end on.
Ah!
Let's do it.
Yes, yes.
Sure. Thank you. There's no reason not to. We do kind of a version of that early in the year.
Yeah.
So we might as well map it out. As long as people realize that those dates might move. You know,
Well,
in the New Yorker, when they say the going-ons about town, they're like, musicians lead complicated lives. Developers lead complicated lives. And some
it
things might
depends
move
who's
those.
bossing them around, you know.
But, ooh. Well, maybe the releases you lead will be super on time.
Who knows?
We'll
We have
get
10
that in
days
there.
to see.
And the place that we should have that, and we have had it a little bit more in the past, I guess we just fell out of updating it, would be /about/roadmap. Probably the best place for that.
Yeah.
And that shows the dates of previous releases, the jazzers they chose, and then we've previously showed some of the updating ones, but I guess we fell behind there. So let's fix that up at Contributor Day.
Let's
that
do
will be
this.
done. As we wrap up, just very quickly, I would love to invite all the organizers for WordCamp US this year to the stage really quick. So if you were involved in organizing, doing something, come on up, quickly. Maybe not too quickly. We did, was it WordCamp? We did have an injury when the organizers were coming up at a previous one. So come up carefully. Okay, come on. Keep going. All right, wait for everyone to get here. Oh, coming from this side too. Oh, okay. Oh my goodness. Look at this. Is this the 47 that we talked about earlier?
Just about.
I'm glad we had it ramped. That's awesome. All right, we're missing one, but so can we do a quick round of applause for putting this together? Thank you so much. And all right, let's go. Thank you all so much for an amazing State of the Word. I'll see you next year.
Thank you.